Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dalaran, and in today's video we'll be talking about PvP gear scaling that's going to be returning in patch 9.1. Another expansion with more PvP scaling, however, probably minus all the negatives this time around. PvP scaling is something I remember people complained a ton back during BFA and even a little bit in Legion. Even though Legion I think wasn't the worst version of scaling, where a character scale based on our item level, where Blizzard dished out secondary stats for PvP depending on that item level number. So you couldn't really control which secondary stats you wanted. So if you were a squishy class that wanted more versatility, tough luck. We're just gonna give you lots of mastery, maybe your worst stat. Then in BFA, scaling was so weird that your numbers on your screen that you hit the enemy weren't the same as the numbers they saw, and people could game the system using the gear and downclocking your item levels in order to cheese it. So scaling of some sort is returning for PvP, but this time it might not be the worst. In a recent blue post, Blizzard talked about how the introduction of the PvP vendors, Honor, Conquest, as well as the upgrade vendor was met with positivity with community, and I gotta agree, I enjoy the vendors a lot. For Legion, you couldn't really do anything with PvP gear since it didn't really matter. All you needed is item level, but I always wanted to be able to get the head-to-toe set so I complete my transmog. I could complete the full look, and the only way you could really do that is by RNG or achievements. Same thing going into BFA, you could also complete it through achievements, but if you wanted that Honor set or Conquest set, you had to get lucky until you eventually rolled it, and you could roll it RNG from arenas or RBGs. So this whole system sucked when it comes to gearing your character, where in BFA stats mattered. It was a nightmare because if you tried to PvP gearing just through PvP, it was impossible. Back in BFA, we also had a whole thing of, you had to PvE, you had to do dungeons and raids to get those trinkets and weapons from those dungeons and raids in order to do better in PvP. That was just ludicrous, and the fact that they added the vendors brought a lot of the sanity back to the game. But also Blizzard knows that as of recent, they've been feeling like when it comes to gearing, players are not doing their favorite activities in order to get the gear for the content that they want to play. A very similar situation from Battle for Azeroth, where PvPers had to do dungeons and raids in order to PvP, but like a reverse, where dungeon and raid players have to do PvP, arenas, RBGs, get the rating, get the conquest, get the gear, in order to participate in PvE content. And Blizzard wants to do with the future update in 9.1 to delineate that the best gear for PvP comes from PvP, and the best gear for dungeons and raids comes from dungeons and raids, something that quite a lot of people in the community have been talking about for a bit. I myself was totally behind the idea that, let the gear be similar item level. I like the idea of someone doing some BGs and arenas and then getting some rating, and then getting some gear from there, and then taking it into Castle Nathria, and then blowing people's DPS out of the water. I like the idea of being able to use the gear kind of crossover from, PvE or PvP. However, I don't want to be put in the same Battle for Azeroth situation where if you want to get good at X, you have to do Y, where X and Y are not correlated to each other. You would think doing more raids and more dungeons would give you the better gear for raids and dungeons, and vice versa for PvP content. The better you do at PvP, the better gear you get in PvP. It makes sense, and it has been the core of World of Warcraft for the last few expansions that I've been playing. And it's good that Blizzard wants to go back in that direction. So this is exactly how they're going to be doing it. But this time it's going to involve a little bit of scaling, as controversial as it might be. Blizzard wants to do Warlords of Draenor style scaling. We talked about it before on this channel, but to go over exactly what that was, sort of kinda, because it's been a couple expansions now. Warlords of Draenor scaling allows you gear to scale up, to jump up in item level when you enter appropriate situations. That means, let's say you have a set of PvP gear from honor points, and when you jump into a battleground, that gear scales up. When you join an arena, that gear scales up. When you turn on war mode, that gear scales up. That gear does not scale inside of dungeons, inside of raids, or really in any of the other PvE focused situations. So scaling is something that a lot of us didn't like in the last few expansions, but it isn't a system where the player is scaling this time, but rather the gear itself just jumps an item level. It's almost like you got yourself a better set of gear. So hopefully that won't have nearly as many wacky, weird things on our characters as, let's say, like Battle for Azeroth scaling, where taking off a couple pieces of gear actually makes you do more damage and take less damage or something. I mean, if we want to talk about it more, it is going to mean that there's going to be more secondary stats on those pieces since they all scale up. more stamina, so it's more health, more primary stats, so your character just does more damage, healing, or I guess if you're do RBGs, you're more tankier. You have more versatility, more haste, more critical strike, more mastery, so more secondary stats and such. And I don't really know how that's going to work out with sockets either. Is the gems inside of sockets also going to scale, or is that going to be a little different? So I feel like you can make an interesting point about how the secondary stats are going to work, and in terms of how is that going to affect the gameplay too much. Is it going to be super impactful or not nearly as impactful as I think it is? I think it's an interesting topic I want to explore in my own free time. If they add gear vendors for us to test every single piece of gear against one another, I think that'll be interesting. Just to make sure there's no bugs, there's no issues, we could see exactly how the scaling works, if it's just as it is as on paper, or is there maybe something extra hidden behind it that Rextroy will probably find out. So taking a look at the actual charts we have right now for the 9.1, this is not a final chart or anything, but this is kind of how the gear will work. The Mythic Raid will have 252 item level, and PvP Duelist, minus the weapons because those scale higher, will have a baseline of 246 item level. This way, Mythic gear inside of a Mythic Raid is better. Mythic 14 plus Mythic plus 14 Vault loot is 252 also. So again, dungeon gear is better in dungeons, like Blizzard said themselves. But inside of PvP situations, your PvP set will jump up an item level. So your PvP set is going to be baseline a little undervalued, and then makes a sizable jump to a much higher number. That means PvP weapons inside of PvP, like the elite weapons, the 233s we have right now, even those weapons will be the best within PvP content. But one of the questions I have is this going to be enough to get raiders to not want to PvP at all, or vice versa? I think for PvPers, depending on the scaling for the honor gear, as in the highest item level you can reach once you rank everything up, but I got a gut feeling saying that I think for players, even though it's a casual PvPing, the PvP gear is going to be all you need. Because of the way that it scales, any of the dungeon gear or any of the raid gear, if you're someone who casually PvPs, I doubt you do 14s, I doubt you do mythic bosses all that often, maybe you do. But most casual players will get the heroics done, will get 10s done, and I don't think the item levels from those are going to be that much better than PvP gear offers. However, for dungeon and raid players, early in the season, it might be a good idea to get some conquest, because if you can somehow get 2100 very, very quickly, like let's say week 1, all that conquest, you're going to be able to get a couple pieces of 246. It'll give you that early game advantage of getting higher item level above everybody with a couple pieces, because duelist gear has a higher item level than heroic gear for the next raid. However, all that gear will eventually be replaced. For some of you, you need the extra item level, you want to get the extra item level, you want to get any kind of advantage over other players because you want to be competitive. So for those of you that are competitive, I think early conquest is going to be a boon. I mean, it's extra item level, at least at the very beginning. Maybe if you can get it, gloves and bracers, and then you get everything else from your weekly vault. Although, there's going to be some people that will get the conquest, get themselves a belt, and they'll get a belt from a 14 in their weekly chest, and already they have to replace it immediately. So maybe there will be enough of those situations where some of you guys will feel, you know what, I'm going to replace it anyway. I don't really feel pressured right now since I'm going to replace it anyway. Why should I even invest any time into PvP? Maybe you're someone who is semi-hardcore, or you don't really care to get into top 100 when it comes to the new raid tier, for example. For those of you that are in that ballpark, hey, you don't really need to technically PvP. Do you need to PvP? If you're competitive, you probably should. But do you have to in order to get the best gear that you will use in dungeons and raids? Not anymore. As it looks like, based on the item level itself, you will get the best gear from dungeons and raids. So in a sense, Blizzard does accomplish a lot of the issues that people have when it comes to gear, which is a good thing. We'll see how it works out. I really cannot wait to test more of it, but I want to hear your guys' thoughts. Do you think the system is enough? Do you think this is going to be worth it? Do you like scaling, or do you not like the idea of Blizzard doing scaling? Because quite a lot of you guys that talked to me before, you're not a huge fan of Blizzard doing any more scaling for PvP ever. BFA, Legion was too much. They just go back to normal. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you guys want to see more updates for patch 9.1, more discussion videos for 9.1, let me know in the comments below and hit subscribe, hit the bell, and I'll see all of you in the next one.